Imagine this: your bank statements and packages keep vanishing from your mailbox. You blame the postal service. Till one morning you catch the HOA Patrol guy in broad daylight stealing your mail like it's part of his job. I went to the HOA president, and she actually defended him, saying he was protecting the community. That's when I made a plan. I reinforced my mailbox, added a little legal surprise, and waited with my camera ready. What happened next? Let's just say the thief got the shock of his life. The HOA president lost everything, and I walked away with the ultimate win. I never imagined I'd be dragged into a war over my own mailbox. But that's exactly what happened. It started out so small I almost brushed it off. Just a missing envelope here and there. It's the kind of thing you could chalk up to human error. Maybe the postal service misplaced something. Maybe the wind had carried it away. But then a bank statement vanished. Then a package I'd been waiting on. 2 disappearances in the same week. That's when I knew something wasn't right. I became more alert after that. I found myself lingering by the window every morning, coffee mug in hand, pretending I was just watching the neighborhood wake up. But in reality, my eyes were fixed on one thing: my mailbox. Days passed with nothing unusual, and I started to wonder if maybe I really was being paranoid. Then one morning, I saw him. He came strutting down the street with the casual arrogance of someone who thought he owned the place. A man in a black vest that boldly read HOA Patrol. He didn't knock, didn't hesitate. He walked right up to my mailbox, opened it as if it belonged to him, and pulled out a handful of letters. He glanced around quickly, shoved the envelopes under his arm, and walked off like it was part of his morning routine. My blood boiled. It was one thing to suspect foul play, but to see it with my own eyes, that was different. Later I'd learn his name: Tommy Harland. He wasn't a mailman. It wasn't law enforcement. It was nothing more than a self-appointed enforcer for our HOA. One of those guys who thought the neighborhood's rules made him some kind of sheriff. I didn't wait. I marched straight to the HOA president, Karen, of course. I found her exactly where you'd expect a lawn chair in her driveway, polishing her cherry red car like it was a prized jewel. "Karen," I said, trying to keep my voice even, "your so-called patrol officer is stealing my mail. I saw it with my own eyes this morning." She barely looked up, just gave a dismissive wave of her rag. "Oh, that's just Tommy. He's doing neighborhood security checks. Sometimes he inspects mailboxes to make sure nothing illegal is coming through." I almost laughed in her face. Security checks? That's theft. Tampering with mail is a federal crime? Do you even hear yourself? Her lips curled into a smug little smirk. "Don't be dramatic. He's protecting the community. If you don't like it, take it up with your lawyer." That was the last straw. She was actually defending him? Not just defending him, justifying a literal felony as community protection. At that moment, I knew I wasn't going to let it slide. If Karen thought her HOA badge of power gave her free reign over everyone's property, she was about to find out just how wrong she was. But that same afternoon, I called my attorney. I explained the situation, and then I asked him the one question that had been burning in my mind. Can I reinforce my mailbox to stop this from happening again? His answer was crystal clear. Yes, as long as it meets USPS guidelines for accessibility. You can reinforce it however you like. In fact, I'd suggest a steel-reinforced post with concrete footing. Legal, sturdy, and very effective. That was all I needed to hear. By the time I hung up, my plan was already forming. I wasn't just going to protect my mailbox. I was going to make sure that the next time Tommy tried to stick his hand where it didn't belong, he'd regret it. And believe me, I had the perfect idea. A little surprise that would make him think twice before ever messing with my property again. A surprise that would shock him literally. The next few days were spent preparing. Tommy thought he could waltz around in his ridiculous vest, treating other people's property like his personal filing cabinet. He was in for a rude awakening. My plan was simple, but it required precision. I wanted something perfectly legal, perfectly safe, but impossible for him to ignore. First came the foundation. I tore out my old wooden post and replaced it with a steel-reinforced one, sinking it deep into a bed of concrete. The thing was built like a fortress now, solid enough to stop a car. The mailbox itself was upgraded to USPS-compliant, heavy-duty, steel with a lockable door that I alone had the key to. On the outside, it looked like just another nice upgrade. On the inside, however, it was armed with a little secret. A low-voltage electric deterrent. Nothing dangerous, nothing that could hurt anyone. It was the same setup farmers use for livestock fencing. A zap strong enough to startle, not injure. I disguised the wiring carefully, threading it through the reinforced posts so no one could see a thing. By the time I was done, you'd never know it was there. But the first person to grab that handle without permission? Oh, they were going to find out. The very next morning, I sat on my porch with my coffee as usual, phone in hand. Camera recording. It didn't take long. Down the street he came, swaggering like he owned every house in the neighborhood. Black vest, gleaming in the sun. HOA Patrol stitched across the back like he was on some kind of official mission. He didn't even hesitate, walked right up to my mailbox, grabbed the handle, and zap. The jolt hit him instantly. Like a startled dog, stumbling back with wide eyes, clutching his hand as if he'd just touched a live wire. The shriek was so loud, half the neighbors turned to look. He flailed for a moment, cursing, then spun around in confusion as though he couldn't believe what had just happened. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. My coffee cup stayed steady, my camera steady, capturing every glorious second. Mail theft, caught on video, I muttered under my breath. But here's the thing, Tommy didn't look embarrassed. He didn't even look guilty. No, he looked angry. Instead of sulking away, he stormed down the street and straight to Karen's house. I didn't have to wait long. Within an hour, they were both marching onto my lawn. Karen in full battle mode, arms crossed, lips pursed tight. Tommy stood behind, her rubbing his hand, scowling like a child who'd been caught red-handed but still wanted to play the victim. "You can't booby-trap a mailbox," Karen screeched, her voice sharp enough to make the neighbor's dog start barking. "That's illegal. You assaulted an HOA officer." I rose from my chair slowly, calmly, and held up my phone. "Funny," I said, "because what I see here is a grown man stealing my mail. Federal Latian U.S. Code, Section 1708 calls that a felony. And last I checked, Tommy isn't an officer. It's just a guy in a vest." Karen's face flushed crimson. "We'll see about that. The HOA will be filing a lawsuit against you for endangering community safety." "Good," I replied, without missing a beat. "Because I'll be countersuing for mail theft, harassment, and negligence on your part as HOA president. Just so you know, my attorney already cleared this mailbox design." Tommy muttered something under his breath, still shaking his fingers from the jolt. Karen snapped at him to shut up, then turned on her heel and stormed off, throwing threats over her shoulder. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, I felt a sense of satisfaction. I'd drawn a line in the sand. They wanted to fight? Fine, I was ready. And little did Karen know, the next battle wouldn't happen on my lawn. It would happen in front of a judge. I didn't have to wait long for the next strike. Exactly 1 week later, a courier showed up at my door with a manila envelope. Inside were papers stamped with the official seal of the county court. Karen and Tommy had filed a civil complaint. Against me? The charges? Reckless endangerment, intimidation, and creating a hostile environment within the community. I almost laughed right there in the doorway. Hostile environment. They were the ones stealing mail and harassing neighbors, yet somehow I was the villain. But as ridiculous as the accusations were, I knew better than to take them lightly. H.O. Presidents had a way of twisting rules until they strangled you with them, and Karen was a master at manipulation. I immediately called my attorney, who practically chuckled when he read the complaint. "They're grasping at straws," he said. "If anything, this works in our favor. They've just given us the perfect stage to expose them." The next 2 weeks were a blur of preparation. My lawyer gathered everything we needed. The video footage of Tommy getting zapped, footage of him stealing mail, statements from neighbors who admitted their letters and packages had mysteriously disappeared, and even USPS regulations proving my mailbox was 100% compliant. We built our case brick by brick, while Karen strutted around the neighborhood, acting like she'd already won. Then the day finally came. The courthouse was buzzing with the low murmur of voices when I arrived, calm and steady in my best suit. Karen and Tommy were already there, looking like a mismatched duo in some bad TV drama. Tommy had his black HOA Patrol vest stuffed into a briefcase, as if it were sacred evidence. Karen whispered furiously to him, waving her manicured hands like she was conducting an orchestra. When the judge entered, the room fell silent. Karen's attorney wasted no time. He painted me as a paranoid vigilante, dangerous homeowner who had set up an electrified trap just to terrorize community members. He pointed at Tommy, calling him a victim of cruel and unnecessary intimidation. Tommy played his role perfectly, holding up his hand with a dramatic sigh. "I still can't feel my fingers sometimes," he muttered pitifully. A few people in the gallery shook their heads sympathetically. For a moment, I almost admired their performance. Almost. Then it was our turn. My attorney stood, calm and composed, and without even raising his voice, he dismantled their entire argument. He walked up to the court's monitor, connected my phone, and pressed play. The video filled the screen, Tommy strutting down the street, yanking open my mailbox, pulling out letters that clearly weren't his, and then the zap. His shriek echoed through the speakers, followed by my steady voice, "Mail theft caught." On video, the courtroom rippled with gasps and muffled laughter. The judge leaned forward, eyes narrowed. "So, the plaintiff admits he was opening another man's mailbox?" Karen shot out of her chair, voice shrill. "It's HOA jurisdiction. We have a right to inspect." The judge slammed his gavel so hard it echoed through the chamber. "Sit down. HOA jurisdiction does not supersede federal law. Mailboxes are considered federal property once installed. Tampering is a crime. I will not hear otherwise." The color drained from Tommy's face. Karen slowly sat back down, her mouth snapping shut like a trap. And in that instant, I knew the tide had turned. The fight wasn't over yet, but victory was closer than ever, you said. "Finish story in Section 4, ChatGPT said. Section 4, the silence in that courtroom was heavy. The kind of silence that told you the outcome was already written. My attorney didn't waste the moment. Calmly, almost surgically, he began reciting statutes. Under 18 U.S. Code, Section 1708, he said, tampering with or stealing mail is a felony. Furthermore, under 42 U.S. Code, Section 1983, no individual may deprive another of rights under the color of authority. Mr. Harland is not an officer, nor does he possess any legal authority. He is simply a neighbor in costume, acting with the reckless encouragement of Ms. Karen, the HOA president." Tommy sank lower in his seat, his vest peeking out of his briefcase like a shameful reminder. Karen's jaw tightened, but her eyes darted nervously toward the judge. The judge let out a slow breath and shook his head. "This lawsuit is dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, I find sufficient grounds for counterclaims. Ms. Karen and Mr. Harland are liable for harassment, attempted mail theft, and abuse of HOA authority. You will both pay the defendant's legal fees and restitution for damages." Gavel cracked down like a thunderclap. Karen shot to her feet, red-faced and sputtering. "Restitution? You can't do this to me. I'm the president." The judge leveled his gaze at her. "You are the president of a homeowners association. You are not above the law." Court adjourned. That was it. Just like that. Months of frustration, anger, and stolen mail ended in a single decisive ruling. I stood, my heart light, and walked out of that courthouse while Karen fumed and Tommy sulked, both of them shadows of the arrogant figures who had strutted into my yard not long ago. The aftermath was swift. Word spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. At the next emergency HOA meeting, Karen was stripped of her presidency in an overwhelming vote of no confidence. Her smug power had evaporated overnight. Tommy, humiliated and branded a thief, was permanently banned from any patrol duties. The very vest he had once worn with pride was now nothing more than a joke whispered about at block parties. As for me, I became something of a neighborhood legend. People I barely knew stopped by to thank me, some admitting that their own letters and packages had mysteriously vanished in recent months. My video had given them closure. More importantly, it had given them proof. Now, every morning, I sit on my porch with my coffee, just as I always have. My steel mailbox stands tall at the end of the driveway, solid, unshaken, a monument to the battle I fought. And every time I see it glint in the morning sun, I can't help but smile. Sometimes justice doesn't come from fists or fury. Sometimes it comes from patience, from planning, from letting the truth speak louder than lies. And in the end, the truth shocked them harder than any current ever could.